The NBA is turning to the most magical place on earth to restart their season, inviting their top 22 teams back to Central Florida in order to settle the score. Michael Pina is an NBA reporter for SB Nation. He joined me this week to discuss the league's return to action plan and what it means for everyone as the league returns to the hardwood. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. But first of all, Michael, I want to take a few minutes and welcome you to Let's Have This Conversation, and we're excited to talk some basketball with you this afternoon.
I'm super excited, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me.
So when we look at the return to play plan, I'm just curious to know, because this seems to be full steam ahead now, I'm just curious to know your thoughts on the whole return to play plan.
Sure. So I think it's first and foremost, I think that health and safety should be the NBA's priority, and they've pledged that that is the priority. And I think it's a little tricky when you are inviting 22 teams and all of the personnel that will accompany those teams to Orlando, to the Disney campus environment. And I think a lot of the different factors have not been revealed to the public yet in terms of how they're going to ensure, to the best of their ability, everyone who participates is health. And I personally was more a proponent for just inviting the 16 teams that would have otherwise been in the playoffs, because I think limiting the number of participants reduces the likelihood of an outbreak or reduces the likelihood of just anyone getting sick. And I think it's going to be really tricky with the number of people that are going to be there. And I can't promise that it'll go off without a hitch. I think there will be hiccups, and it'll be really interesting to see kind of how the league navigates all that.
Keeping everyone safe, obviously, is the league's top priority. Let's talk for a moment on how you believe they'll be able to safely get that done.
Right. So, I mean, the specific details have not really been released yet. We know that they're going to have to test constantly, and that's going to take up a lot of, resources that could potentially be used elsewhere. And also, we don't know how I guess free might not be the best word, but it's the word I'm going to have to use, how free players are and family members are and coaches and referees are from moving in and out of the quote unquote bubble and campus like atmosphere and environment. And if someone leaves but does not necessarily contract COVID, are they going to be punished in any way? Is there going to be any repercussions for I just don't know what the rules are going to be for everyone who's there. So it's going to be really interesting over the next, I guess, over a month when they try to iron out everything. and try to figure out what the best possible protocol is going to be for a totally unprecedented situation.
And can you tell me, with such a big layoff, what do you think the quality of play is going to be once a play resumes? How do you think the actual games will look on the court?
That's a great question, Kevin. I I have no idea. I don't think anybody does. I would imagine that players are going to need some time to refamiliarize themselves with one another and just the pure essence of NBA competition, because the layoff is essentially going to be longer than an average offseason for everybody who's playing. So all that time off is longer than NBA players are normally accustomed to, even in an average year, when you go from the end of the playoffs to the beginning of the following season. So it's foreign to their bodies, it's foreign to their minds and how they mentally prepare. And these are creatures of habit, and they've been completely kind of tossed upside down in terms of their structure and their normal rhythms and routines. So I think it's going to be interesting. I think that every team that's invited gets to play, I believe, 8 the play-in games to try
Regular season games, yeah.
Yes. And to try to figure out who's going to actually participate in the postseason. Maybe those games will serve as a good kind of opportunity for everyone to clear their throat and get more comfortable playing basketball with each other again. But at the start, I expect it to be pretty sloppy, not the greatest product. But by the time the playoffs roll around and by the time people are more comfortable and more familiar with their surroundings, I expect it to look like NBA basketball.
Now, do you think obviously we've all been starving for sports? I know NASCAR is back, but do you think that the NBA coming back now can potentially market or appeal to fans that wouldn't normally watch the games because there's really nothing else on TV?
I think so. You would expect that to be the case, just because, as you said, there just isn't anything else to fill the void of sports, which millions and millions and millions of people love and have been ingrained in their day to day. So I think that people will be very interested, even maybe casual fans will be interested in just at least checking it out at first to see how it looks, and to see, this is what is substituting for the typical professional sports competition that entertains us all, or entertained us all previously in a normal time. And so I would think that the ratings, regardless of the quality of play, at least at the start, will be extremely high. And I guess I'm using the draft, the NFL draft, the ratings were through the roof. We had incredible ratings for the Last Dance documentary with Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls. And that wasn't even live sports. That was a 10-part documentary series. So you add that, and then, as you said, there have been some sports that have come back, but nothing at the level, I think, or global appeal of something like the NBA. So I think that people should be really interested, if not fascinated, if not entertained and thrilled by the prospect of it coming back.
We talked about testing earlier, and how big of an issue do you think perception will be with the NBA sort of hoarding tests, because you're going to have players and coaches tested on a regular basis? And you touched on this earlier, but if someone tests positive, do you think then we go back to where we were? Do we isolate that person or group of people? And if you get a rash of these cases again, do you think the league would have to consider shutting down again?
That's the worry. The primary worry is obviously, a superstar testing positive for coronavirus in the middle of a playoff series that he's participating in. And then, Adam Silver has come out, the commissioner of the NBA, and said that if one player tests positive, they're confident that they can continue on and roll everything through. If I don't know what the tipping point is or the threshold where all of a sudden you can't go on. I mean, if like 7 players on a team test positive overnight or something, I would imagine that playoff series is going to be canceled or postponed at least until all those players recover. And what's really scary about all this is there's still questions in the medical community about the after effects of people who test positive, athletes who test positive in particular, and the effect that COVID can have on your lung capacity and just your ability to operate at peak condition. And so if you're just playing these games to play them and the players who tested positive aren't really able to perform at their highest ability, then the whole essence of the NBA playoffs is compromised. I don't know. There's no really easy way around this. Obviously, there are a lot of different factors and motivating factors to get it done, one being money. But
that's a big one.
That is a humongous one, Kevin. Yes. And so if there is a situation where they have to shut down after starting up, it would be, an unprecedented disaster for the league in a lot of different ways.
Now, this new proposal goes through the middle of October when the regular season is supposed to start. So if this proposal goes through, how do you think the sport will be reset in terms of when they start the next season? Do they wait for a vaccine? Do they keep everybody in Disney World? How do you think the logistics of the next season is going to play out once this is over?
So today we saw a report that was tentative. Travis Schlenk, the general manager of the Atlanta Hawks, has said that the NBA has been telling general managers around the league that next season, the 2020-2021 season, would be condensed, and that there is a need to have 82 games for revenue-related reasons.
And it all comes back to money.
It all comes back to money, Kevin. And they want to keep the 82, not cut the season short, because they want not to compromise, the television contracts, the local broadcasting, the national broadcasting, all of that. That's a ton of money. I do not know how this will impact gate receipts and revenue that's created through fans in an arena environment, because
especially for small market teams, right? Because they rely heavily on that revenue to stay afloat. So
100%, that's a big chunk of money right there. And as you said, if there is no vaccine available, will fans be comfortable going to games and spending money on tickets? And will they want a discount on tickets because of the obvious health risk? Will they not have, obviously I think we're technically in a recession right now. And so there's a lot of people who do not even have expendable income and expendable money that they otherwise would have had previously before all this. So will people even want to spend what they can on tickets and on merchandise and all the other different things that are associated with the NBA that people purchase that make that give the NBA its value monetarily? So it's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out. I don't think anybody has the answers right now, but I'm fascinated to see what happens.
Do you think the NBA will spend more money on things like their streaming services like NBA TV, NBA League Pass, to try and get more people in to watch those games to recoup those revenues? And do you think they'll make those streaming services more readily available?
That's a really good question. I don't know. I think that it goes back to kind of the point I just hit where you don't know. Obviously, you want to recoup money if you're the NBA, money that's been lost. And they're probably, teams, organizations, and the league as a whole are probably trying to figure out different ways to do that. I saw recently one potential, not a solution, but I guess a byproduct of what's happening is that coaches will not receive the salaries that they have been receiving on new contracts, which is interesting to me, and I guess a bummer for coaches. But if you can only charge so much for League Pass, and without turning people away who can't afford it, it's already pretty expensive, I think, as someone who pays for it. So I think it's going to be another variable that we really don't have a lot of information on, and we're just going to have to see what happens.
Let's talk some basketball for a second. What are you most looking forward to watching unfold once the league comes back at the end of July?
I mean, I'm just looking forward to watching basketball in general.
I figured that would be your answer.
Yeah, I love the NBA so much, and right now, we should be watching the NBA Finals, which is like really depressing to think about. But I mean, there's all these different storylines that I could get into. I'm fascinated to see what the Lakers look like, what the Clippers look like. I want both those teams to face off in a playoff series. I think everybody does. I want to see what the Houston Rockets look like if they can resume their exciting small ball style of play and see how successful that is in Orlando. I want to see what the Bucks look like. Who comes out of the East? You have the Toronto Raptors were really hot throughout the regular season. Can they keep that momentum up? What do the Boston Celtics look like now that Kemba Walker is going to be healthy? He was, suffering from a knee injury before the season was suspended. So the Celtics are going to be healthy, and seeing who's going to get the 8th seed in the Western Conference with the Blazers as a heavy favorite and what they look like with Zach Collins and Yusuf Nurkic coming back, and what Dame Lillard looks like, and even seeing Zion Williamson play basketball again. I'm always excited for that. So that's just one of a few of the many, many storylines I'm looking forward to.
Fantastic, Michael. Thanks for a few minutes and providing your perspective on the return of basketball. It was a lot of fun, and we want to thank you for being on the show this afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Kevin.